London, the Wolf Campus Torah Journal, and the president of ITA, the American Israeli Jewish Network. He's been an outspoken supporter of bipartisanship and a strong supporter of the state of Israel, and has written in dozens of publications on matters relating to politics, religion, and Israel. He holds a master's degree in Jewish education from Yeshiva University and is a member of the Rabbinical Council of America and is a Judaic studies teacher, grades 6 through 8 at Manhattan's Park East Day School. It's an honor to introduce you now to Steven Shalowitz. Steven is the host of Jewish National Fund-USA's IsraelCast podcast and his own podcast, The One Way Ticket Show. He's a JNF USA New York board member and on JNF USA's social media committee, and invites you to connect with him on all social at Steven Shalowitz. Steven, Rabbi, thank you. I look forward to this conversation. I now turn the program over to you.
Well, thanks so much for that, Sarah. And Rabbi, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for joining us here this evening for our very last in the series of JNF reading series for 2021. And we've got a lineup for 2022, but really, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, right. Well, you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you is not because you're a friend and you're my go-to rabbi for all things ecumenical, but I thought that the book, again, Sacred Days, Thoughts for Every Jewish Holiday, even though we're not beginning a new Jewish New Year, but we're going to be beginning a new year. So I thought that would be kind of nice that if everyone can kind of get a hold of the book and then read each chapter as the holiday approaches, because you don't have to read that, you don't have to sit down all at once and read the whole book. You can just read a chapter based on that particular holiday, because that's how you divided everything up, right?
Yeah, it was actually, some holidays are easier than others, right? Hannukah, Yom Kippur are easier to write about than Tzom Gedalia, but I did go out of my way to make the point to have something for every single day in the Jewish calendar. So yeah, there's something for everything.
Well, I loved Tzom Gedalia because I was born on Tzom Gedalia, actually.
There you go.
We might even talk about did you know that, by the way?
I did not know that. No.
Okay, we've known each other all this time and new information comes out. All right, well, listen, before we really jump into the book, when I told people, Rabbi, that you were coming aboard as our featured guest, I got so many. Is he related to the Rabbi Poupko that fill in the blank? So before we really get started, can you just briefly share your family tree? Sarah alluded a little bit to it, but I want you to elaborate because you have real what we call yichus.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm a 11th generation rabbi, and it's interesting. A lot of people are talking, especially in New York, about cream cheese these days. So my great-grandfather was a rabbi in Soviet Russia, and he was being persecuted. He was about to be sent to Siberia, and his cousins, the Raskises from St. Louis, who are the founders of the biggest kosher cream cheese establishment, brought him over with his 8 children. 7 of those 8 children became rabbis, and many of those children became rabbis. So there are many rabbis in the family, thank God, all over America, Canada, and Israel. So that's the family. And so thank God I have an uncle in Montreal, Chicago, Seattle, and other places.
So you always have somewhere to stay wherever you go.
There you go. Yes. So some of them are in places that I wouldn't get to often, but yes, I hope to get to Seattle soon, but yeah.
All right. Take me with you. Well, listen, as we talk about your family, and again, really before we dive into the book, talk about your own family's JNF connection, because when you shared that with me the other day, I've known you now for years, and I didn't know this about you either, about your family. And I just thought it was really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah. So in 1890, someone named Israel Lishansky moved from Ukraine to Israel, to the Jaffa port. And he came to the Jaffa port with several children, and it was a tough run back then, very, very tough. They went a bit north to a new Jewish town. So Haifa was an older town, but then there was near it a place called Zichron Yaakov. And so they slowly started settling the land, he and his sons. And some of those names became sort of household names in the Zionist history. So it's people who helped build Zichron Yaakov, Yavniel near the Kinneret, Metula way up north on the border with Lebanon, and Petach Tikva, someone to Petach Tikva. One of them, his name was Yosef Lishansky, was part of an underground, a Zionist underground that helped the British against the Turks. He spied on the Turks in the First World War. And the idea was that the British promised that if you help us, you will have a state here. And so they helped the British Army. And unfortunately, in his case, the end was tragic. He was caught by the Turks right before the end of World War I and hung in Damascus. So that is Yosef Lishansky. But throughout their endeavors, they were helped by people like the JNF starting 1903, who really were at the forefront of purchasing agricultural lands, helping establish lands, helping dry up the swamps, sending experts in agriculture, and helping them build those towns of Yavniel, Metula, Zichron Yaakov, Petach Tikva, etc. So the connection with the JNF goes way back, and obviously, the role that the credit the JNF gets here is endless, whether it has to do with the agriculture, the foresting. In fact, I have a cousin that still farms the exact same land in Yavniel and Metula. So yes, we're very thankful to the JNF and to the incredible work it has done in reviving the land.
He still farms the land from the time that his family first arrived in the 1890s?
Yes, they live in the same house. Now, given the house that they first moved in is now more of a garage, because it's so small, but yes, they live in the exact same house in Yavniel, and he goes out on his tractor, and yes, it's you can look him up. It's the Abramowitz family. He's there, and he's still farming the land. Yes.
How fantastic is that? I love that story. Well, thanks for sharing. Well, listen, let's pivot now to the book. Again, Sacred Days, congratulations on it. And I'm a firm believer, Rabbi, that holidays shouldn't just be what I call a one and done, and then you move on to the next one. And as I was going through the book, I kept wanting to ask you really about what we can learn from holidays and how we should take and implement the meaning of holidays into our daily lives. So indeed, they're just not one and done type of experiences.
Yeah, good question. So what do you take? How do you carry the holiday with you? So we just celebrated Hannukah, and it feels like it's still here with us. And so I just two lessons that I would say regarding Hannukah from this book. One of them actually took place in Hebrew school in Park East. I didn't write where, but I'll tell you now, it took place in Hebrew school. And as a rabbi, you read so much about Hannukah. What's the meaning of the lights? What's the meaning of the historical celebration? The rabbis have all these essays on it. And so I ask a class of Hebrew school students, I say, why do we celebrate Hannukah? And a kid raises his hand up and says, well, we celebrate Hannukah because we're Jewish. And that simple answer was such an eye-opener, because sometimes we get caught up with the story, the oil, the battle, but in essence, the essence of Hannukah is the idea that we were able to keep our culture, keep our identity in the face of Greek imperialism. And so the idea of Hannukah is the ability to stay Jewish in a world that sometimes isn't, and the ability to maintain who we are regardless of what's going on in the world. And so in a way, that fifth grader taught me more about Hannukah than I have known before or studied in any text before.
So would you say then the reason why we are celebrating these holidays is because we are Jewish?
Exactly. Yes. It's the celebration of being able to be different, which Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote a whole book called The Dignity of Difference.
Right, the dignity of difference.
And that's exactly what Hannukah is about, because being a minority for 3,200 years is basically impossible. To be able to keep to who you are throughout so many centuries, throughout so many cultures, throughout so many geographical locations and circumstances is nearly impossible. And so the idea that we were able to do this is thanks to holidays like Hannukah, where we say, look, we respect the world out there, but yet our unique flame is going to shine bright no matter what and no matter where we are.
Now, Rabbi, for the benefit of all those that are joining us, I'm not going to go through every single holiday in the book because we simply don't have time to do that. And again, recommend that everybody pick up a copy and you can read each one of the chapters about each one of the holidays during or before the holiday arrives. But the next holiday, and this is one, there are a couple that I want to tick off in our conversation, one of which, of course, is the next holiday that's coming up, and it's really the JNF holiday, which is Tu B'Shvat. And that's coming up at the end of January. And so I'm wondering if you can just provide reflections on Tu B'Shvat, anything that would surprise us about the holiday, anything that we should know about the holiday that we might not otherwise be familiar with.
Thank you. Good question. So I studied in a Lithuanian yeshiva, and if you want to know what the expertise of Lithuanian Jews like myself is, it is to not celebrate too much. It's not they're not the type that will break out in a dance and singing. And so when I was in yeshiva, I used to say, well, what is Tu B'Shvat about? And so there's this famous song that goes, Tu B'Shvat Chag LaIlanot. It's a holiday for the trees. And they would say, this is a holiday for the trees to celebrate, not for us. And so I think that you have that tendency, which was strong throughout the centuries, to regard Tu B'Shvat as sort of this minor day. And yes, it is, like you say, the holiday of the JNF, because the JNF did revive it. And I argue that there's a good reason that the holiday went dormant, and there's a good reason that the JNF revived it. Why? There's a story, if everyone likes a good story from the good old times, except this isn't from great times, where the Roman Adrian. After the 132 Bar Kokhba rebellion, he's traveling through the land. And for those who don't know, this is actually very important to the JNF's work. There was actually a systemic Roman effort to destroy trees and agriculture in Israel. Part of the suppression of the Bar Kokhba rebellion was to purposefully make the land uninhabitable. And so after the absolute destruction of the rebellion and its, the fierce Roman response, there was this real Roman effort to uproot trees, to burn fields, and to make the land uninhabitable. And he's passing, and that's the background that you don't see. The Talmud shares a story. He's passing next to an old man, and he sees the old man planting a fig tree. And he says to him, this is so silly of you, because you're an old person and the fig tree takes a while till it gives fruits. So you're never going to see the fruits of this tree. That's the story in the Talmud. Really what he means is, in historical context, is you're never going to see this land flourish again. Really, he means this is over, right? You're an old man, your rebellion was quashed twice by the Roman Empire. And so why are you even bothering to plant a tree? You're never going to see it again. And the old man looks at him and says, when I was born, I found a land that was filled with trees that were planted by someone else. And so just like my great-grandparents' parents planted this tree for me, even though I didn't do anything, I'm planting for future generations. In a way, Adrian was right. The land did become desolate, and that old man, although he did see the fruits of that tree, that's the ending of that Talmudical story. But Hadrian's broader point was correct. The land was destroyed, and the Romans did succeed. That is why Tu B'Shvat went dark. The JNF revived the land. The JNF came back to Hadrian 1,800 years later and said, look, you may have been right for 1,800 years, but that is stopping now. And sort of that old man's response is echoing now when you see the land of Israel filled with millions of trees that are just beautifying the land, where he says, I found the land that was thriving and flourishing, and I'm planting for future generations. So he may have not succeeded in that generation in restoring the land of Israel, but that story carries with us. And so on Tu B'Shvat, which is a holiday for the trees, we celebrate exactly that. And that's why the JNF really blew new life into the day of Tu B'Shvat, where you see children and school trips going to plant trees and sort of giving a sacred meaning to the concept of planting trees.
That's really beautiful, Rabbi. Thank you for sharing that. One of the threads that I find that rolls throughout the Jewish calendar is the act of fasting. And I want you to talk about that because in the book, it was on page 20. In fact, you wrote what the Rambam had said about fasting, right? And if you have the book, we can both open
I was
it.
going to say, I think that was Tzom Gedalia, which is your birthday. So this is definitely...
Yes, Tzom Gedalia. Yes, he mentioned it about Tzom Gedalia.
Yes.
So according to Rambam, the reason we fast does not necessarily have to do with mourning. It has to do with learning from past mistakes. We fast to mark historic events from which we must learn, unquote. I'm sure you remember that. So can you talk just in broad brushstrokes about this notion of fasting, what it does, why we should do it, and what we should get out of it?
Absolutely. So that's a very good question. And I'm happy we have, yeah?
Yeah, and also, if you can also clarify the 24-hour fast, like Tisha B'Av, and then also, Yom Kippur versus the sun up to sundown, like Tanit Esther, for example.
Yeah. So first of all, confession to begin with, I am not a great faster. But
you fast on Yom Kippur, clearly.
I fast on Yom Kippur and I fasted on Tuesday. On Yom Kippur, I fast and officiate, which in some weird way is actually easier. It's easier to be busy with all the speeches on Yom Kippur than to just fast.
What do you mean you're not a great faster? You mean you have trouble?
Like fasting? It's hard. I get hungry. But interestingly, the easiest day
I have a secret for you I'll share with you after the call's over.
Terrific. But in some strange way on Yom Kippur, when I'm giving all these speeches, it's easier to fast, even though I'm exerting more energy because
it's mind matter, isn't it?
Yes. But I do fast, and there are 5 fasts a year in the Jewish calendar. You have obviously Tzom Gedalia, your birthday. You have Yom Kippur, which is a sort of a purifying fast. You have what we had this past Tuesday, the 10th of Tevet, marking the siege on Jerusalem. You have the fast of Esther in the month of Adar, a day before Purim. And then you have the 17th of Tammuz, marking the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem. So I have a 6th here. And then you have the fast, obviously, of Tisha B'Av, mourning 2 destructions. Like you're saying, Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av are different because they are a 25-hour fast, as opposed to the other fasts, which are dawn to dusk. And so there is a place in Judaism for fasting. There is a value given for fasting. Now, in many ancient cultures, in fact, in many modern religions, the idea of fasting is seen of some kind of self-punishment, or you're sort of inflicting pain on yourself, and you're sort of trying to atone for something. You're focusing on the past. That's definitely the vibe you get when we're talking about all these ancient stories. And yet Maimonides says that the idea of fasting is not just to reflect on the past or sort of deprive ourselves of something, but it's really to pause and think and ask ourselves, what are the lessons of history? And so we take these times of fast and we ask ourselves, what have we done that we can be doing different? What lessons should we be learning from history? And how do we go forward with those? And so the example of the fast of Gedalia is so important. And I think to many, it resonates today more than ever after the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. I know people that used to not fast before that on the fast of Gedalia and then started fasting because it highlights to us the danger of political rivalry, of extremism, and the need to be able to have a peaceful conversation even when we disagree. And so that is the lesson of the fast of Gedalia, is the dangers of division and sort of hatred between people.
Yeah. Another thread, Rabbi, indeed there were many, but one other thread that I do want to highlight is this notion of zachor, to remember, and particularly with Yom HaShoah, as you put in the book, and your grandfather had a rather beautiful thought, which is worth sharing when it comes to the lives lost. And I'm wondering if you can relay that.
Thank you. Yeah. So my grandfather, who I mentioned, was brought over by the Raskis family, came to the United States at the age of 13. And thank God he did well. He went to Yeshiva University. He was a rabbi in Pittsburgh for more than 60 years. And all of his children became rabbis and Jewish educators. And he had first cousins, and he had children that he grew up with that died in the Holocaust. And so he knew these kids because he left them when he was 13. And he used to say that we know how many people were killed in Auschwitz. We know how many people were killed in Sobibor. We know how many people were killed in Babi Yar. We know 1.5 million Jewish children died, but we don't know what each and every one of those would have been. How many Albert Einsteins, how many Golda Meirs, how many Rabbi Kook, how many Rabbi Soloveitchiks, how many great Jewish leaders, or like you said, who knows if there would have been a cure for cancer there, right? If one of them would have become an incredible scientist that would find a cure for cancer. So when we say Zachor, it's not just to remember what was lost in terms of the physical loss, but it's also the incredible spiritual and cultural weight that all these people, each and every one of them carried. You go to Yad Vashem, and to me, the part that just brings most tears to my eyes is you stand in that dome and you look at the children, you look at the people there, and you think not just about the number, but you think about those lives and what they could have become. And that's, I think, our responsibility is to remember those and to sort of try and make sure that their legacy is kept alive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had the same sensation when I was there at Yad Vashem, thinking what they could have been, what they could have achieved, and what they could have given to us and to society. Mm-hmm. So indeed. You dedicated the book to Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. And if you can also weigh in, Rabbi, what he meant to you personally, and then what he meant to Judaism in general.
That's a good question, and I think that his loss is still lingering because he died at the peak of COVID. There were only, I think, less than 40 people at his funeral, and it's just a loss that the entire Jewish world is still grappling with. We saw this year when his first Memorial Day, his first yard site was marked, how many people feel the loss. And I got to know him when he came for his year in New York. He was teaching in NYU and Yeshiva University. And I was then a graduate student in Yeshiva University, and I signed up for his undergraduate courses and just anything I could to hear from him, because the intellectual magnitude of his lessons, coupled with his just incredibly warm personality, were just so overwhelming. One of the stories I say is that I bought a book for my grandmother, and one of his books, and I wanted his autograph. So I came before a class and I asked him to autograph the book, and he sat down and he asked me, "What's her name?" Now, her name is Henrietta, so that's something I wouldn't know how to spell right away. And he sat down and he just wrote this whole beautiful paragraph to a grandmother that he didn't know and didn't meet, but just to, mark her birthday. He was just such a mensch. And if you look at the Jewish community in England now, just how well set up so many of the institutions are, especially when you talk about combating anti-Semitism, addressing Jewish education, communal structure. I would say that it's a matter of envy to many, and so much of that has been set up, has his fingerprints all over it. Whether it's his connection to diplomats, to people in the international community, interfaith community. I think he was just like such a man of inspiration, of all trades. And that's a loss, I think, that's lingering with all of us.
Rabbi, I don't know if I ever told this to you, but when I was living in Singapore, I was living there 2 times in my life, and the second time was 97 to 05. And Rabbi Sacks came to Singapore with his wife, Elaine, and the Jewish community, and I was active in it then, we hosted him for several days. And he told the most beautiful story. When you said about Jewish institutions, that's what I wanted to share with you and for those that are listening, because He said that he was invited to an event by the Queen. He was very close, actually, to Prince Charles. They were very close personal friends. He said he was invited to an event by the Queen, and he looked at his calendar, and it coincided with the opening of a Jewish school. So he thought to himself, what do I do? My queen is asking me to an event, but I've been asked to open a Jewish school. So what did he decide to do? He opened up the Jewish school. What happened then was the queen then arranged a private audience with him.
Wow.
Right. And so he managed both, and he really put his values first, let's put it that way. And his values really shone through right there. So it's one thing that I definitely remember about him, and other stories that he relayed to us about his relationship with the royal family, which was actually quite beautiful. So just getting back to the book for a moment, I loved your chapter on Shavuot. And I want to read something here. And by the way, I'm straining my eyes, Rabbi, because I need new glasses. I need new readers here. You know, another year older, right? Okay, here it is.
Do you want me to read it?
No, that's okay. I think I can. I think I can read it here. It's on page 217 for you. It's at the very bottom. And you wrote about Shavuot. And I think this is a really nice introduction, because I never really thought about it in these terms. Shavuot is the only Jewish holiday for which the Torah does not give a set date, does not obligate individuals in any mitzvahs, and does not inform us about the specific spiritual mission of the holiday, unquote. And I would just love you to elaborate on the holiday of Shavuot, which was always and is always one of my favorite holidays.
Thank you. Yes.
Notwithstanding.
Yes. And to all the Jewish men who are lactose intolerant, like myself, I'm with you on this. And it's not always...
Well, Rabbi, I have to interrupt you, because as many people know, I turned plant-based, I'm vegan, and I just came from a big plant-based expo at the Javits Center last Thursday and Friday. And you would be absolutely amazed at the amount of plant-based cheeses that are out there that you can make really, really delicious cheesecake with. So you don't have to have cow's milk to make a bomb of a cheesecake. So anyway, on that culinary note, I'll turn it back to you.
So Shavuot, part of the reason for the cheesecakes and these various customs is because there really isn't much of it in the Torah, much of, description of what is supposed to happen on Shavuot, what you're supposed to do on Shavuot. In fact, it's the only holiday in the Torah that does not even have a date in the Torah. It says on the 50th day from the morrow of the Passover. And so in fact, that was a matter of controversy in the time of the Second Temple of when exactly to observe Shavuot. It was a huge debate between the Pharisees and Sadducees. And so it's such a mystery of a holiday where we don't know what to do, and we don't even know what date it's on. So why is it that way? And so I explained that based on an idea of Erich Fromm, the great psychologist, where there's running away from something and there's running towards something. There's two different kinds of running. And so when the Jews leave Egypt after the Exodus, God wants to make sure that we're running towards something, that we're going and creating something, that we're going and excited about this mystery destination and asking ourselves, what are we going towards? What is coming down our path, so that we don't look back as much as we look forward? And you mentioned Rabbi Sachs, another incredible quote of his, which I think helps explain so many things, is a rule, he said, which is when something happens to a nation, it can ask itself two questions. Who did this to us? Or what can we do about it? And which question you're going to ask is going to determine your fate. Because if you're asking who did this to us, you're going to be looking back, you'll be lingering, you'll be looking for a scapegoat, as opposed to asking yourself, what can we do about it? That is much more forward looking. So Shavuot is about the looking forward. After the Exodus from Egypt, we're asking ourselves, where are we heading? What's our direction? And that's when we look forward to the Torah at Sinai.
I just referenced having lived in Singapore, and I remember the sanctuary, let's see, how old is the synagogue now? it must be about 150 years old or so. It's just a fabulous old colonial Moorish revival building. And it was all decorated in flowers. And at the time I said, what is the backstory? And I want you to share that, why some synagogues actually will decorate their sanctuaries with flowers on Shavuot.
Yeah, so there's this beautiful custom. Some people do it in their houses. They get flowers in their houses. And I want to throw also a JNF angle into this. So on the holiday of Shavuot, there's this beautiful custom to decorate synagogues with flowers and with greenery. And that's on the that's sort of reflecting or echoing the sentiment that the rabbis say that Mount Sinai became festive when the Torah was given on it and was covered with greenery. So it's sort of a reenactment of Sinai where we decorate the synagogue with flowers and branches, etc. Now, this took a new twist in the late 19th, early 20th century. Why? Because Shavuot is described also as the holiday of the first fruit, Chag HaBikurim. And so that's when you bring the first fruit to the temple. And when people built those first kibbutzim, those first agricultural farms in Israel, whether, like I said, it's Petach Tikva, Zichron Yaakov, Yavniel, Metula, Degania, there are many. What they did is they turned Shavuot into a holiday celebrating that those first fruits. And so they would have this festival that takes place still in all these kibbutzim, especially in the north of Israel, but also in the south, around Gaza. All these areas have these lovely celebration on Shavuot where they bring their produce, they bring their first fruit, and it's sort of this holiday of gratitude, a Thanksgiving holiday where these pilgrims, so to speak, come and they bring their first fruit. And so that became also a big part of the Israeli Shavuot culture.
And I'm not being trivial when I ask you this question, but where did the cheesecake thing come in? Because as I understand it, there's a dairy connection with Shavuot, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. So that is the ultimate question. Where does the dairy come from? Some say it actually originates in Ashkenaz, where the Torah is compared to milk and honey. And if you want the Israel connection there, it's also a land of milk and honey. And so there came this custom where people would have sweets on Shavuot to remind them of the sweetness of the Torah. And so they would have these milk products and honey. Others say a more questionable theory. And I say questionable not because it's not commonly said, but there's questions to ask about it because the Jews got the Torah at Sinai and got the commandments of shechita and making sure the meat is kosher. So it's much easier to find dairy kosher than it is to find kosher meat. And so since the Jews didn't know all the details of kosher meat, they resorted to dairy for a while. And so on this day marking the receiving of the Torah on Shavuot, we say, okay, let's reenact that time at Sinai where we didn't know exactly what kind of meat we can eat. And we had this, we had dairy products instead.
All right. Well, I just want to remind everyone that's joining us here, if you have a question for the rabbi, just put it in the Q&A and you can find it in the toolbar at the very bottom. If not, I have 12,000 more questions, but we won't keep you on from now until Shavuot. Obviously, these calls go on for around an hour, a little less than an hour or so. Okay, so it's 7:40 right now here on the West Coast. So we have maybe about 15-ish minutes, 20-ish minutes left or so. But anyway, once again, you can put a question or a comment in the Q&A and I'll get to it. When I was going through the book, you really left no stone unturned when it comes to every Jewish holiday. And you even include Shabbat, which is a holiday that comes once a week. And we're going to get to Shabbat in just a second, Rabbi. But when I was reading this, I was wondering if there was an unsung holiday that people really need to pay more attention to. I mean, there's always, of course, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Pesach, Sukkot, maybe for a lot of people, but it's like usually the first day or two, and then people are sort of tired of the holidays, dare I say. And I think probably a lot of rabbis are as well, because it's a lot of work preparing for the high holidays. So I'm just wondering, is there an unsung hero of the holidays? Is there a holiday that needs to get more attention?
So there are a few. One is Pesach Sheni. It's the second Passover. It was celebrated only in biblical times. And the idea was that if someone was impure in the first Passover, exactly a month later, they can bring their second Passover. A lot of people don't know that.
So it's like a do-over, really.
Exactly. And it's a holiday of second chances. And I think, we live in a world where that's so needed. Sorry for going again back, but, you can never have enough of Rabbi Sachs. One of his last slichot addresses was about the internet and how we live in an unforgiving age, right? There's this saying that says the internet is forever. And so once someone says something, that there's no do-over. And so he spoke about the need to have more forgiveness in this world. And he spoke about this idea of forgiveness. And so Pesach Sheni is a holiday of redoing things and making sure you get a second chance. And there's this really lovely custom of some people to eat matzah. I always end up forgetting. And also I'm still it takes me several months to recover from the amount of matzah I had just on Passover. But a month later, a lot of people do have that custom of eating matzah on Pesach Sheni. And it's just a reminder of the need for second chances.
By the way, don't you usually have a lot of matzah left over from the regular Passover?
Yeah. I mean, you're going on matzah. Some people eat it till Shavuot. So it's matzah is something that stays around. And the good thing about matzah, which is how it became what it is that it doesn't go bad. You can keep your matzah for a while, and it's been stale for some time. So it can be used for a long time after Passover.
Yeah, I put lentils on matzah. And my pink lentils, and then I put some avocado, black pepper, chili flakes, oregano, and that's how I eat my matzah afterwards. So it's actually really good. I do lots of fun stuff with matzah. Yeah, so I think what you're saying is it's very much of a redemptive type of holiday, right? It's all about second chances. Also, in that vein, do you personally have a holiday that you particularly like to celebrate?
A good question. So my great-grandfather would get up in his synagogue and he would speak on the holiday, whatever holiday it was. And he would speak about the importance of the holiday. And a congregant came to him and said, "Rabbi, there's something very shady going on here, because every single holiday you speak and say, this is the most important Jewish holiday of the year. And how is it possible that every single Jewish holiday is the most important holiday, right? That's not really possible." And so he said, "Look, I have 8 children, and every time there's one of them in front of me, if you ask me who my favorite child is, I'll say the one that's right there." And so I think that's the attitude that I like to have, is when I am there, it's an immersive experience, like you said, and it's something that you want to give it your fullest. So I would say every one of them has its lesson, and to make the most of it, just try and when it's there to really get the most of it.
Rabbi, before we go back to the holidays, before we talk about Shabbat, I want to talk about Zionism, actually. And because Jewish National Fund has launched a whole year-long campaign on Zionism, conversations on Zionism, to reclaim the narrative, to reclaim the beauty, the inclusivity of what Zionism is really all about. I do want to encourage everyone that's on the call right now, you can go to youtube.com/Zionism Studios. And I think Sarah is going to put that into the chat so people can copy paste it, because these have been really eye-opening conversations about Zionism. And I want to ask you really a 2-part question. The first part is really, what does Zionism mean to you? And how do you connect Jewish holidays with Zionism? And is there a particular Jewish holiday that does resonate particularly well with Zionism?
That's a very good question. I have the honor and privilege of teaching Jewish history, and I get to sort of look over this idea of Zionism every year anew and to inspect it. And to me, it's the most incredible idea. And it also has deep religious meaning to me, not just because of the connection to the land of Israel, but to me, Zionism is zooming out and looking at us as a people, as a collective. And so, yes, the center of that is Israel, it is Zion, but it's not limited to that. It's our look at one another and saying, look, we are part of one nation, and we are going to decide our common destiny together. You look at Herzl's original Zionist Congress, right? It's the first time in 1800 years where Jews get together and they, like you said, reclaiming the narrative, they say, what are we doing with ourselves? And that's a mind-boggling thing that nowhere outside of the context of Zionism have Jews done that. You know, there's the famous joke where you have 10 rabbis and 15 opinions. Well, Zionism is the only time throughout our history where people actually did get together and people said, as a Jewish people, what are we doing for one another? And it implies an incredibly democratic idea of saying, look, we are going to have this conversation together, and B, a care for one another. So the Jew, Theodor Herzl from Vienna, is concerned with what's going on in Kishinev. The Jew in New York is worried about the fate of anti-Semitism in France with Alfred Dreyfus. We're always sort of, it's an incredible idea. And I think one of the things that highlighted it to me as a religious person is that recently in Belgium, the parliament of a local area passed a law banning shechita, of kosher meat. And the people who spoke out against that, it actually did not come from a religious organization. It was the local Israeli consulate. They said attack on kosher food is an attack on Jewish life. You can't have Jewish life in a place if there's no kosher food. And so that was such a revealing moment to me, where you see that Zionism is all about mutual care, about saying, look, I see you and I care for you. And we're not just going to be this tribal society where we all go to our corner and forget about one another, but Zionism is about coming together and saying, okay, what is the common destiny of this people? What is our shared fate? And so that's something that I would say goes throughout the Jewish holidays. Whether it's Tu B'Shvat and the need to rebuild Israel and plant trees, or whether it's Shavuot and speaking about the Torah, the first fruits, it all comes back to Zionism. You look at Sukkot, something as simple as a lulav, a etrog, a myrtle, and a willow. Where do those grow? Well, they don't really grow in Sweden. They are, it's all about having a shared fate and the center of our heart being in Zion, even if we're not living there.
Right. Well, you know, you close the book with the chapter on Shabbat, and I really enjoyed that. And indeed, it is a holiday. It's a sacred day, and it's a holiday that we get once a week. So how great is that, right? That you can take off once a week. And you had a subsection in there. So I want to kind of focus on Shabbat right now, but I first want to get to a subsection that you had in there. And it's 10 reasons to invite 500 people to your Shabbat dinner and why you will love it. Okay. So I want first to talk to that.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? This is a very New York chapter because pre-COVID, my wife and I used to have 10, 15 people over every Shabbat, and it was the most incredible experience. We had rabbinical students from Yeshiva University, JTS, which is conservative, and Hebrew Union College, which is reform. We had one Shabbat, we had someone who was working for a very non-Zionist organization, I'll leave it at that, and we had someone who was working for a very Zionist organization. And somehow everyone sat around the same table, ate the same food, and had conversations. So Shabbat is an incredible experience of bringing people together. And what better way to do that than having those people around the same table? In a way, I would say, again, this is pre-pandemic, Shabbat was the fastest growing denomination in the Jewish people. everyone was doing their dinners. You look on social media now also, right, that everyone is excited to post what kind of challah they're having, what they'll be eating. And I think that's a revival that we're seeing in today's day and age, where things are really centered around that table.
In the essence, really, wait, but by the way, before we get to I want to hear really the essence of Shabbat and what people should do. Again, I invoked several times already here that I had lived in Singapore. And I will tell you that I had an amazing experience, as you know, there. I worked in advertising by day. I had a radio show at the weekend. I acted, I did all kinds of things, really cool stuff. But among my favorite experiences in Singapore were my Shabbat experiences and my Shabbat dinners. And there was one family in particular that I was friends with. Well, several that I used to go to their houses, and I won't go into each one of the experiences there, but one in particular was an Israeli couple, and they used to begin preparation for Shabbat on Tuesday or Wednesday, because you would walk in the apartment and they probably had 30 people at the Shabbat table, because they had the Israelis that were visiting, or they had people from the community, or they had friends that were living there, etc. And it was the most lively experience. And among my favorite experiences, as I said, living there all those years was Shabbat. Another family I was friends with, half the family was Persian Jewish, the other half was Afghan Jewish. They're still my very dear friends today. The other family that I'm very close friends with, she is American, he's Australian. They now live in Israel. Again, their Shabbats were wonderful. And those were amongst my favorite experiences during those years that I was living there. And when you talk about galut, that's really, really galut. You know what I mean? So it was a beautiful experience. Okay, enough for my stroll down memory lane there. And for all of our listeners, the rabbi and I are very old friends, so I feel like I can go off on these tangents with the rabbi, and he'll know what I'm talking about. But talk about, though, the essence of Shabbat, really, and what it really is intended to be, because we have a very eclectic audience. Many people have different levels of observance of Shabbat, but at its core, what should Shabbat really do? And what should that holiday that we get every week, be all about?
Thank you. Good question. So I think one of the reasons we're seeing sort of a revival of Shabbat is because of the understanding of a need to have at least one day where we don't leave our imprint on the world. The idea that there's a day where we are not manipulating the world, we are sort of stepping back into ourselves. There's a very famous saying that says more than the people of Israel, more than the Jewish people kept the Shabbat kept the Jewish people. Who said that? Not a rabbi. In fact, not even an Orthodox Jew. It was Echad Ha'am, the great Zionist leader. So he recognized that. And one of the examples I cited was in the news again this week, was that Major League Baseball has two players that they're drafting into Major League Baseball, Jacob Steinmetz, and the other, I think his last name is Krieger. And there's a whole question, are they going to play baseball on Shabbat? And so I wrote about this, and the idea that even if, it doesn't really matter what the laws of Shabbat are, as much as that Shabbat is a day where we are stepping back from the world, stepping back from leaving an imprint on the world, and sort of leaving the world, sort of without our fingerprints.
Well, don't you think also it's the realization, Rabbi, that we have to turn off from technology also?
Yes. You know what? It used to be hard for me to do that, but now I'm like, can we do Shabbat on Tuesday? Because sometimes it's so refreshing to have that sort of break.
Okay, I want to build on that, though, because when we talked at the beginning of our conversation about lessons from holidays, there are certain lessons from Shabbat that I try and incorporate into my week. So, for example, come 8 o'clock at night after Wheel of Fortune is over, no judging, folks, I'll turn off the TV, I'll turn off everything, right? I'll still do my emailing. I might have to, do some work for my shows, et cetera, as well as, the 2 podcasts and so on. So I might do that, but I won't have the TV going, and I won't have that extraneous noise. And I know that when I do that, I have such a better night's sleep. And when I go to bed earlier, because I really need my sleep. And I think sleep is totally underrated. And when you can do that, just like you do on Shabbat. And the other thing is I take a nap on Shabbat without fail. And I try and do that during the week as well. So I think there are certain things and principles that we can incorporate from Shabbat into our daily lives. And also this notion of just having a good meal, right?
Yes.
And sitting down with, whether it's yourself or whether it's your family or friends or whatever, just this notion of having like a proper good meal. Don't save the china, the good china for Shabbat. Use it every day. Be careful, but use it every day because life is too short, isn't it?
It is a great experience that, like I said, in a way, it's definitely the Friday night dinner aspect is the fastest growing Jewish denomination, where people really recognize the power of, like you're saying, turn off the electricity or the noise and come together, sit around the table together, look at one another, and actually have that conversation. Yeah. So I think especially for children, when you have parents that are so busy with work and emails and what have you not, Shabbat is really a time that forces parents at least once a week to say, you know, I'm going to give my fullest attention to my child. I think that's an incredible thing. Right.
Well, listen, Rabbi, I'm a man of my word. I said we're going to go for about an hour, and we've been going for 55 minutes already. So I think we're going to start winding down right now. Really, just enormous thanks for joining us for our last, for 2021, our last in the series of the Jewish National Fund reading series. Really, I just so enjoyed reading the book. Again, I want everyone to pick up a copy, Sacred Days. And in fact, you know, it would make a nice Christmas gift for non-Jewish friends, right? Because they might learn a little bit about Jewish holidays. Right? And what we're all about. So again, people can just pick it up and read a chapter at a time when the Jewish holiday is approaching. So really, congratulations on this, and really much continued success and good luck. And before we push off, I just want to let everybody know that our next reading series is going to be on February 16th. And maybe Sarah, if you can kindly put that into the chat so that everyone can copy paste it. It's going to be on February 16th, and the book is called A Passion for Israel, Adventures of a Sar El Volunteer by Mark Werner. This is the book.
Wow. My grandmother actually did a Sarel for many years.
Really?
And it was the highlight of her year. She would come from Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah.
And it was not only her highlight of the year, it was all of her friends that would go and volunteer. She would pack medical supplies, fold parachutes. It was the highlight of her year. So I could now second that and ask everyone to join you because it's such an incredible program.
How's that for an endorsement? I had no idea about that one as well. So
yeah.
Always learning something new about Rabbi Poupko when he's in the house. So again, this is on February 16th. And just for all of our loyal listeners that have joined us, we started this when the pandemic started, okay? And we were going monthly. We took a hiatus for 2 months just because we had all the Chagim in September, and then October there was the JNF mission. But we're going to be going to quarterly this coming year. And so tell all your friends. And if you like this, please email me, let me know what you think, and would love to field any questions. I can be reached at, where can I be reached? Steven at theonewayticketshow.com. Anyway, so there's that. Anyway, or find me on social media at Steven Shalowitz. And Rabbi Poupko, can we give you a shout out where folks can find you as well?
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. What an incredible privilege. I would say I know the JNF from before I was born because it's just it's so much part of the DNA of the Jewish people by now, and just to be here with you, who I've known for so many years, being so communally thoughtful, always thinking about others, and the embodiment of Zionism in the sense of always thinking about us as a collective, thinking about Am Yisrael. So thank you, Steven, for being the host, and it's really been an incredible privilege. So thank you. And if anyone wants to find me, I'm very visible online at Rabbi Poupko. And really, I cannot thank you, Steven, and the JNF enough for the amazing work that you guys do.
All right. Well, listen, on that positive note, we wish everyone a great weekend, a Shabbat Shalom, an early Shabbat Shalom. You all know what to do this coming Shabbat and for every Shabbat throughout the year. Have a very happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2022. And Rabbi, I'll see you before too long. Take it easy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to the JNF.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks.